Hello everyone, welcome to our channel Qubit Educational Services. In our previous video, we discussed and solved the NEST 2016 question paper Mathematics section MCQs. So today we are going to do the same thing, that is we are going to solve the multiple choice questions from the NEST Mathematics, but this time we are going to solve the MCQs from the year 2017 as you can see on the screen. So without wasting any further time, let's jump in. Question number 4.1. So the mathematics section in the NEST is the fourth section. Okay, 4.1. Let C be the set of all complex numbers and let P be that set of complex numbers such that mod of Z is equal to 1. And let Q be that set of complex numbers for which Z squared is equal to 1. Then P is equal to Q. P is a proper subset of Q. P intersection Q is the empty set, or Q is a proper subset of P. So within this example, they have mixed two topics. The first topic is the complex numbers, and the second topic is the set theory. Okay, because you can see the words like proper subset, empty set, intersection of two sets, and so on. Okay, now let's analyze the two sets that are given to us. The first one is P. Okay, it is the set of all those complex numbers whose modulus is equal to 1. So now we know that mod Z equal to 1 represents a circle. Particularly it represents a unit circle on Argand plane. Okay, so there are infinitely many numbers in the set P, because there are infinitely many complex numbers whose modulus is 1, and those complex numbers whose mod is 1 are also called as unimodular. Uni means 1. Okay, so that is the set P. Let's now go to set Q, which is the set of all those complex numbers whose square is 1. Okay, now we know that the equation x squared minus 1 equal to 0 or x squared equal to 1 has two solutions in the set of real numbers, positive 1 and negative 1, and the case of complex numbers is no different. Okay, so if someone is telling you that he or she has a complex number in the form a plus ib with b not equal to 0 and a plus ib squared equal to 1, then that is wrong, that is impossible. Okay, if you want, or if you are saying that a and b are real numbers with b non-zero, then you cannot have a plus ib squared equal to 1. Okay, so although they are saying that Z belongs to the set of complex numbers, the roots are of the equation Z squared equal to 1 are still negative 1 and positive 1. Okay, which are real numbers, or now we should call them purely real numbers. Okay, because their imaginary part is 0. Okay, now definitely P is not equal to Q, because Q consists of only two elements in it, negative 1 and positive 1. However, P consists of infinitely many elements in it. Okay, so options A and B are ruled out. Okay, now let's talk about option C. P intersection Q is the empty set. Now clearly all elements in Q, that is minus 1 and 1, have modulus 1, or they are unimodular. Okay, so we can now say that P intersection Q is not the empty set because Q is a subset of P. Okay, but because Q is not equal to P, or P is not equal to Q, we must say that Q is a proper subset of P. Now we call any set to be a proper subset of the other if it is not equal to the other. Okay, something which we learn in the set theory. So Q is a proper subset of P because every element in Q is present in P, but every element in P is not present in Q. So Q is a proper subset of P, hence the correct option is D. Now let me just remind you that we have two symbols now. When we say that A is a subset of B, we just say this, okay? But when we want to say that it is a proper subset, then we say A is a proper subset of B. So we don't write that, or we don't draw that horizontal line which we draw here. Okay, yes, so that is 4.1. Let's go to 4.2. Yes, now 4.2 is a question based on the applications of derivatives and geometric progressions. Okay, so let's read it. 4.2, if A, B, C are positive real numbers in GP, then the graph of y equal to ax squared plus bx plus c is a curve that intersects the x-axis at 2 points, is entirely below the x-axis, is entirely above the x-axis, or is tangent to the x-axis. Okay, now before we actually go to the solution, let's try to consider all four possibilities. Okay, we know that y equal to ax squared plus bx plus c will be a parabola, the graph of this. Okay, and what are the four possibilities? Possibility 1, it may not intersect the x-axis at all. Possibility 2, it will be tangent, or the x-axis will be tangential to the curve. Possibility 3 is entirely below the x-axis but may not intersect the x-axis, and the fourth one is it intersects the x-axis at 2 points. Okay, let me use the orange color now. So if we consider this parabola, it may be vertically upwards or vertically downwards, but nonetheless it can intersect the x-axis in two different points. Now to solve this problem, we will use the idea of the first derivative test and the second derivative test. Okay, so it is known that a, b, c, the coefficients are in geometric progression. So I'm assuming that the common ratio is r, and clearly because a, b, c are positive, r will also be positive. Okay, and let the first term be in the GP be a, second term will be ar, and the third term will be ar squared. Okay, so after substituting b and c here in the function and differentiating it with respect to x, what are we going to get? We will get 2ax plus b. Okay, but what is b? B is ar, right? So we will get the equation 2ax plus ar equal to 0, if at all we are interested in the minimum, or I should say the extreme value of the function. Okay, it can be either maximum like this, or it can even be minimum like this. Okay, so the first derivative is going to, or should be, equated to 0, which gives x as minus b upon 2a, and if you replace b by ar, okay, x is going to be equal to negative r upon 2. Now because r is positive, what we can conclude that irrespective of the location of the parabola or the curve, its extreme value is going to be in the second or in the third quadrant because x is negative. Okay, but please keep in mind that we are now not interested in that value. Okay, what we want is, we want to decide the nature of the curve. Okay, so we know that the peak or the trough is going to be either in the second or in the third quadrant because their x coordinate is negative. Okay, now we will go to the second derivative test. Okay, we will differentiate 2ax plus b, which is the first derivative, and if you differentiate it one more time, you will get 2a, and because a is positive, 2a is going to be greater than 0, Yes. So according to the second derivative test, if the second derivative is positive, then it must be minimum. Okay. Yes. Now we will find out that minimum. If it turns out to be positive, then we will get the answer. Even if it turns out to be negative, even then we will get the corresponding interpretation or the corresponding new situation. Okay. So now our job is to substitute x as minus r by 2 in the definition of the function, that is ax squared plus bx plus c. So I have done that here. Y min, okay, a into r squared by 4 because this is x squared, plus b into minus r by 2 because it is x, plus c. Okay, so it is now going to be ar squared by 4. Now see that we are not using b and c, we are using b as ar and c as ar squared. Okay, yes, and here because we have the product of b and x, it is going to be a r into minus r upon 2, or effectively it will be minus ar squared by 2. Okay, if you want you can take ar squared common, then inside the bracket you will have 1 upon 4 from the first, minus 1 upon 2 from the second, and 1 from the third. Now clearly this box bracket is positive. Okay, because 1 minus 1 upon 2 itself is positive, and if we add 1 upon 4 to it, it will not change its sign. So what is y min? Y min is somewhere, well, I should say the minimum point is somewhere in the second quadrant, isn't it? Because x coordinate is negative, but y coordinate is positive. Okay, and now let us come back to the statement that a is positive. Now if a is positive, then the limit of y as x tends to plus or minus infinity will be positive infinity. Okay, because ultimately the second power is going to dominate over the first power and the 0th power, no matter how large b and c are and how small a is. If everything is positive, then x squared will dominate the other two, and therefore the therefore the limit at infinity, both positive and negative infinity of y is going to be infinity. So which one of these four situations best describes the parabola? Well, that's first method, that is this. Okay, which means its minimum is above the x-axis, so the parabola does not intersect the x-axis at 2 points, is also not entirely below the x-axis, and the parabola is also not tangential to the x-axis, but it is entirely above the x-axis. Okay, so there are two things that we discussed just now. It has a local and the global minimum, okay, which is at minus r by 2, and that minimum value y min is positive. Okay, so that ensured that the local minimum of the parabola is in the second quadrant, and because of this there is no chance that the parabola is going to intersect the x-axis. Okay, in fact the line y equal to y min is going to act like a tangent to our parabola in the second quadrant. Okay, so the correct option is C. Now I have one more method for you, which is a modified version of this method. Okay, so what I have done is, instead of dealing with A, B, C separately, okay, or as distinct entities, I have brought in numbers. Okay, so I have picked the geometric progression as 1 to 4. Okay, so I have taken A as 1, B as 2, and C as 4. Now because this MCQ is not having more than one option correct, any possible combination of numbers, positive real numbers which are in GP, is going to give us the correct option. Okay, so apply the same thing. Get dy by dx. What is it? 2x plus 2. So equate it to 0. X will be equal to negative 1. And see, now the second derivative is positive. It will be 2. So because it is positive, we should have the minimum value of y. Okay, and what is y min? Y min will be obtained when you substitute x equal to -1 here. Yes, so -1 squared 1 plus 2 into -1 minus 2 plus 4. Okay, so 4 plus 1 5, 5 minus 2 3, and y min is positive. That's what we got here. Okay, so if y min is positive, if the result is true for a particular case, or sorry, if the result is true for a general case, it must be true for a particular case. Yes, and because we know that although we are solving this question, we just need to pick the correct option, right? Yes. So again, because y coordinate is positive and x coordinate is negative and it is a minimum value, we can conclude happily that the curve entirely lies above the x-axis. Okay, so 4.2, option C. Question 3. If for some positive integer n greater than 1, we have 1 plus x squared so on till x to the power n minus 1 equal to 0, then summation x to the power k plus 1 upon x to the power k, where k runs from 0 to n, is -2, -1, 1, 2. Again we are going to bring in our favorite trick, okay, that if the result is true for any positive integer n, it must be true for our choice of n. Okay, because you can see that in the options none of them depends on n. Okay, so it must be producing the same result for any value of n. Yes, and once we recognize that, our job is done. So I have selected the easiest value or simplest possible value, that is n equal to 2. Now if n is equal to 2, then what is the last term here, or what will it be? X to the power n minus 1. If n is 2, n minus 1 will be 1. So the highest power of x will be 1. Okay, n minus 1 is 1. So then this equation boils down to 1 plus x equal to 0 or x equal to -1. Okay, so this is the only solution of our equation, 1 plus x equal to 0. Okay, and then what I have done is I have evaluated that series. Okay, k runs from 0 to n. See, now here you cannot take n minus 1 because you have n here as the upper limit on k. So k going from 0 to 2, we can use this value of x now. So minus 1 raised to k plus 1 upon minus 1 raised to k. Okay, now first k equal to 0, minus 1 raised to 0, 1, its reciprocal 1, so 1 plus 1, 2, plus now increment k by 1, minus 1 raised to 1, minus 1, plus 1 upon minus 1 raised to 1 is minus 1. So these two terms will now eventually cancel each other, 2 and minus 2. But now let's go to the third term, because the last value of k is 2. Minus 1 squared 1, minus 1 squared 1, 1 upon 1, 1. So 1 plus 1 is 2, which will cancel the second term, which is minus 2, and then plus 2. So you have this number now, that is 2. Option D. Okay, see, that means it is not necessary to actually I would say solve the problem by considering or by keeping n in the situation. Okay, just take a simpler value of n and do it. See, now this is allowed only because it is a multiple choice question. If it comes as a theory, let's say, then prove that it is equal to 2. Okay, then you have to come up with some other technique, either by mathematical induction or by using complex numbers. Okay, and I'll come to that in a while. But because it is an MCQ, you can consider a special case and be happy that you got the correct answer. In this case, it is option D. Okay, now I want to tell you two things about this. First is, if you observed, these terms on the left hand side, they are in geometric progression, 1x, x squared till x to the power n minus 1. Okay, with the first term 1 and the common ratio x. Okay, and then it has connection with our equation x raised to n equal to 1. So I will first tell you that. And second thing is, there was a similar question in the ICER aptitude test 2019, in fact the very first question there, and even there I did not solve it for a general case. I took a particular value of n. I think I took 3 and I got the right answer. Okay, so let's go to them now. Yes, first you observe that 1 plus x squared plus so on till x to the power n minus 1, this represents a geometric progression with first term 1 and the common ratio equal to x. Okay, so the nth term will clearly be x raised to n minus 1. So this is going to be the sum of first n terms of a GP. Okay, and you can either use this formula a into 1 minus r raised to n upon 1 minus, or a into r raised to n minus 1 upon r minus 1, anything would do, but because the first term is 1, there is no need to write it. Okay, now if it is equal to 0, then we can say that the roots of this equation that is there in the problem, 1 plus x squared so on till x to the power n minus 1 equal to 0, it will have the same roots as that of the equation x raised to n equal to 1. Okay, the only root that we should exclude now is 1. Okay, because if x is equal to 1, then the denominator will be 0. Okay, and if you know complex numbers a bit, particularly the de Moivre's theorem and the Euler's formula and their application to find the nth roots of unity or 1, then that might be useful. Okay, so the nth roots of unity are x equal to e to the power I into 2 pi k upon n, where k runs from 0 to n minus 1. Okay, if you take n, then you will again get 1. Now in our case, we are not allowed to take x equal to 1. Okay, because of that, so we have to consider k equal to 1, k equal to 2, k equal to 3, so on till k equal to n minus 1. Okay, now these will be the roots of our equation, and we have to consider any one of the roots. Okay, and just continue solving it. Okay, the other thing is, if you look at the second number, it is actually the reciprocal of the first. Okay, and it ensures that the imaginary part of our root will get cancelled, because if you have cos theta plus I sin theta, its reciprocal is going to be cos theta minus I sin theta. Okay, so if the original number is cos theta plus I sin theta, its complex conjugate and reciprocal will be cos theta minus I sin theta. So if you just add them, then it will eventually be 2 cos theta. Okay, so you can try solving the same problem with the help of this method. And now comes the second thing that I was talking about. In the ICER aptitude test 2019, I have already uploaded the solutions, so you can watch them. There was this question, the question number 31, the very first one. Let 1 zeta 2 zeta 3 till zeta n be the roots of the equation x to the power n equal to 1. So the same equation that we talked about for n greater than or equal to 3. So currently we have n greater than 1, and there it is n greater than or equal to 3. Okay, then the sum 1 upon 2 minus zeta 2 plus 2, 1 upon 2 minus zeta 3, so on till 1 upon 2 minus zeta n equals. Okay, now here they are considering all the roots except 1. But in our case, we are considering only one of the n minus 1 roots. But anyways, the trick that I have used to solve 31 of ICER aptitude test and this third question from NEST 17 is the same. Okay, just pick a particular value of n make sure that it does not produce the same expression for ABCD. In our case, in the NEST, it's good because all these numbers are independent of n. Okay, so by using this trick of special case, you can simplify the MCQ and solve it. Okay, so that was 4.3, option D. Let's go to 4.4. 4.4 is also a very simple, but I would say a good question, because it tests your knowledge of the greatest integer functions. Okay, so let's see what the question is saying. Suppose there is a function f defined from the set of real numbers to the set of real numbers, and f of x is box x. Okay, box of sine x, where for any real number t, box t denotes the greatest integer not exceeding t, okay, or less than or equal to t. Then f is continuous at pi by 2, pi, 3 pi by 2 and 2 pi. Okay, so it will also test you for your knowledge of continuity of functions, correct? And because all these options are greater than 0, it's enough to consider the graph of sine x for positive values of x. Okay, so the green curve is that of the function sine x, and now let's try to plot the graph of the function box t or box sine x. Okay, see, now if you consider all the numbers between 0 and pi by 2, okay, then you agree that sine theta is less than 1 but positive, so you need to project the graph of the function sine x between 0 and pi by 2 on the x-axis. Greatest integer function less than or equal to the number. Okay, but what is happening at pi by 2? At pi by 2, the function sine x takes the value 1, and because we are considering greatest integer less than or equal to t, the function has a discontinuity or a jump discontinuity now. Okay, to the left of pi by 2 it was 0, but now at pi by 2 suddenly it is 1. So now don't worry about the other section. Okay, that means this portion, because anyway it will be discontinuous there. Okay, because the LHL is not equal to the value of the function at that particular point. Okay, and this behavior will continue. Okay, because in the second quadrant we know that sine is positive, so from pi by 2 to pi again it will decrease from 1 to 0, so the graph of the function will also be along the x-axis, graph of box of sine x. Okay, and this process will not continue after pi, because once you reach pi, then the value of the function or the values of the function sine theta become negative. Okay, which means they will now be in between -1 and 0 until you reach 3 pi by 2. So the greatest integer function or greatest integer function of sine x between -1 and 0 will be -1. Okay, yes, but you have to exceed pi because sine pi is 0. So from pi to 3 pi by 2, okay, from pi to 3 pi by 2, the graph of the function is going to be along the line y equal to -1, the segment, that the red segment that you can see here. Okay, and now it would be interesting to note what happens at 3 pi by 2. All of us know that sine 3 pi by 2 is -1. Okay, and the moment you cross 3 pi by 2 and start going towards 2 pi, again sine theta will be decreasing, or I should say increasing from -1 to 0, but it still is in the range -1 to 0, isn't it? So what is the value of the greatest integer function of sine x? Again -1. Yes, so it is the point 3 pi by 2, wherein the left hand limit is -1, so is the right hand limit, and so is the value of the function. So these are the three necessary conditions and sufficient conditions for the function to be continuous. Yes, so out of these four, 3 pi by 2 is the correct option. right? So 4.4c. Now I can frame a similar question, okay, and instead of saying the greatest integer function not exceeding t, I can also come up with the same example with the least integer function. Okay, now I leave that to you. Okay, I would like you to try out three possibilities. Possibility 1, f of x equal to box of cos x. Okay, possibility 2, f of x equal to the least integer function of sin x, and possibility 3, least integer function of cos x. Okay, all three possibilities should be worth looking at, so I'm giving that as homework to you. Okay, it should be a good practice, because now see, in the same problem we have we are being tested for three concepts. First, the greatest integer function and the least integer functions. Second, the nature and the behavior of the trigonometric functions sine and cos. And third, the continuity of the functions. So although sine and cos are continuous everywhere, their least and the greatest integer functions are not. Okay, so that is 4.4, option C. 4.5. An examination consists of 10 multiple choice questions like this one, where each question has 4 options, only one of which is correct. In every question, a candidate earns 3 marks for choosing the correct option and -1 for choosing a wrong option. Assume a candidate answers all questions by choosing exactly one option for each, like you. Then the number of distinct combinations of the answers which can earn the candidate a score from the set 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 is. Okay, now this problem differs from the standard, or I should say standard similar problems in the last part. Okay, then the number of distinct combinations. Now what they mean by distinct combinations is something which I will explain you at the end of the solution. Okay, and because of the presence of the option 120, you may think during our solution that 120 is the right option, but that's not true. Okay, so the words distinct combinations will result into a change of opinion, and then you will shift to the correct option. Okay, anyways, so we will start our solution. What I've done is I've assumed that x is the number of the correctly answered MCQs, and because the candidate is answering all of them, the number of incorrectly marked MCQs will be 10 minus x. Yes, because this examination consists of 10 MCQs. So what will be the score of the candidate? Candidate earns 3 marks, so 3x will be the positive score. But because 10 minus x MCQs were not correctly marked or incorrectly marked, those MCQs will lead to addition of a negative score, which will be 10 minus x into -1. Okay, so the total score will be 3x minus 10 plus x, or 4x minus 10. Okay, now this 4x minus 10 is always going to be an even number, because you have 4 into x, which is always even, and 10 is anyways even. Okay, so out of these elements in this given set, all odd numbers will go. So it's not possible to get a score of 15, 17 and 19 in this examination. Second thing is that 4x minus 10 will never be divisible by 4, because 4x is divisible by 4 but not 10. Okay, so that leads to the exclusion of the options or elements, I should say, 16 and 20. So the only possible score that he can earn is 18. So let's now go to the corresponding number of questions, that is x. Okay, now just to demonstrate it, let's consider 4x minus 10 equal to 15. So let's say in a hypothetical situation the candidate got 15 marks. Okay, so 4x minus 10 equal to 15, so x is 25 upon 4. Is it possible? No, because x is the natural number of correctly answered MCQs. So that's definitely not right. And same argument works for 17 and 19, and for 16 and 20 you will also get a fraction. Okay, so 4x minus 10 equal to 18 is the only equation which will give you the valid value of x, that is a natural number, x equal to 7. Okay, so he will earn 18 marks, he or she, provided he marks 7 questions correctly and marks the remaining 3 incorrectly. Okay, now if you remember solving problems on binomial distribution, then this will remind you that the answer may be 10C7. Okay, selecting 7 questions or selecting correctly marked 7 questions from 10. So you may think that the number of ways is 120. Okay, but that's not true. Okay, because they are saying distinct combinations of the answers, that phrase is now going to come into play. I'll explain this. Okay, let's assume that the candidate marks the questions 1 to 7 correctly. Okay, all correct. Now for 8, 9 and 10, okay, we know that they are not right, but how many options does this examination is having per question? 4 options. Yes. Now if it is having 4 options and we are looking for distinct combinations, it means now there are 27 possibilities within the incorrect options. Okay, for example, let us assume that the correct answers are A, option A, option A, option A. Okay, now obviously the candidate has not marked A because he has got 3 wrong. But the thing is, we need to consider the distinct combinations. That means 8 can be B, C, D, 9 can be B, C, D, or 10 can be B, C, D. Okay, so 8 is wrong if he marks or she marks B or C or D. 9 is wrong if it is marked B, C or D, and same goes with 10. Okay, so now there are 3 raised to 3 distinct combinations within the incorrect options, or incorrectly marked questions I should say. Okay, so the number of distinct combinations is not 120, but it is actually 120 into 3 cube. So within the incorrectly marked questions there are 27 possibilities. Okay, so the distinct combinations is 120 into 3 cube, because 10C7 is 120. So 120 into 27 is 3240. Okay, so that is option C. Okay, and see, this MCQ is perhaps the best example or best illustration where correctly reading or carefully reading each and every word of the MCQ is important. Because if you read the MCQ by just going through it or a glance, having a glance at it, you will end up with the answer 120. But is it true? No. Well, what you got is right, but it is not matching with what the problem is asking you to do. Correct? And hence, please read the MCQ carefully, let it take time. Okay? But I think if you have decided to solve this question correctly, I think you should pay 100% attention while reading each and every word in the MCQ. And if you have watched my videos, I do the same thing. Okay, I start reading from the first word and I never miss anything. Okay, sometimes it is also important to read the options. Okay, I mean, in one of our previous questions, I have done that. You'll find me doing that. Okay, I have eliminated, I think, option in one of the questions. I eliminated the options by just reading them. Okay, I think that continuity problem, x equal to 3 and x equal to minus 3. Okay, so please read the problem carefully, including the options. That is 4.5. 4.6. if a, b and c are the roots of the cubic equation x cube plus px plus q equal to 0, then the determinant 1 plus a 1 1, 1 1 plus b 1, 1 1 1 plus c is equal to p plus q, p minus q, pq and 2p plus q. Okay, now this question is primarily based on two things, as you can see. The first one is determinants, obviously, and the properties of the determinants, and the second one is the roots of, or I should say the relation between the roots of polynomial equation and the coefficients of the polynomial equation. Okay, we have ready-made formulas for them, for quadratic equation, for cubic equation, and for in general nth degree polynomial equation. Okay, so first what I have done is I have tried to simplify this determinant so that we will not be required to expand the entire or whole determinant. Okay, so try to make as many elements in the first row equal to 0 as possible. Okay, because that will then save our time. So what I have done is I have performed two operations. First one is I performed r1 minus r2. 1 plus a minus 1 is a. 1 minus bracket 1 plus b is minus b, and 1 minus 1 0. Then I performed the operation r3 minus r2. 1 minus 1 0. 1 minus 1 plus b, so again negative b, and 1 plus c minus 1 is c. Okay, now I have expanded this using our standard determinant expansion along the first row. So it will be a into c plus bc plus b, right? Now see, b has acquired a negative sign, so its cofactor will be minus 1 times its minor, so plus b, into 1 into c minus 0 into 1, so just c. Okay, simplify that. A into c ac plus abc plus ab plus bc. Okay, so it is abc, that is the product of the roots, plus ab plus bc plus ca, so this is the product of the roots taken two at a time. Okay, taken two at a time. So if you know a bit of the theory of equations, then the product of the roots of a cubic equation is always okay, let me just write down the formulas. Suppose our equation is ax cube plus bx squared plus cx plus d. Okay, if this is our polynomial function and if we are finding the roots, then sum of the roots, that is alpha plus beta plus gamma, is minus b upon a. Then product of the roots taken two at a time when added, that is alpha beta plus beta gamma plus gamma delta, is c upon a, and the product of the roots is then minus d upon a. See, now in our case the product of the roots is going to be minus q, isn't it? Because a is 1 and d is q. And what is alpha beta plus beta gamma plus gamma delta? C upon a or p upon 1. Okay, so the answer is p minus q. Okay, now the thing that I have not used to solve this problem is that the sum of the roots is 0, because there is no x squared term here. Okay, so a plus b plus c is equal to 0. Although I have not used it here, it's worth taking a note of that. Okay, the sum of the roots of this cubic equation is 0. So that is 4.6, option B. Yes, see, now just in case if they ask you this, what is the value of the determinant plus a plus b plus c cube, anything. Now the moment you know that a plus b plus c is 0, it doesn't matter whether you have its cube, its fourth power, or its nth power. Okay, this expression will always be 0. Yes, so that will not change anything. Okay, so the answer will still be p minus q. So that is 4.6. Let's go to 4.7 now. Now 4.7 is also a very simple question related to continuity of functions. So there is this set x which includes all real numbers except -3. Okay, and we are defining a function f from this set to the set of real numbers, again a piecewise defined function. So f of x is x cubed minus 27 upon x squared minus 9 if x is not equal to 3, and it is equal to 9 upon 2 when x is equal to 3. Then f is continuous at all real numbers. Well, definitely this is not true because f is not defined at -3, right? So option A is ruled out straight away. B, continuous at all points in its domain, might be possible. C, discontinuous at only x equal to -3. Now again this option is not making any sense because -3 is not a part of the domain of the function. So there is no question of the function being discontinuous there. Okay, because f of -3 is simply not defined because they have excluded -3 explicitly from the domain of the function. Okay, and discontinuous at only x equal to 3. Okay, so the question that we now have is to check for the continuity of f of x at 3. Okay, simple application of the L'Hospital's rule. Limit as x tends to 3 of f of x is limit as x tends to 3 of x cubed minus 27 upon x squared minus 9. You will get the indeterminate form 0 by 0. Yes, so apply the L'Hospital's rule. 3x squared numerator, 2x denominator, cancel x. It will be 3x by 2 or 9 by 2. Is it equal to the value of the function at x equal to 3? Yes, because f of 3 is 9 by 2, it's given. So it is continuous at x equal to 3, and because x equal to -3 is not a part of its domain, we need not worry about the options C and A as we have already discussed. So option B, right? It is continuous at all points in its domain because the only possibilities were where there was only one possibility and that was 3, and we have tested that it is continuous there. Okay, yes, so the correct option is B, 4.7. Let's now go to 4.8. Let there be a function defined from the set of real numbers to the set of real numbers. Let it be odd, and suppose f of e to the power x is equal to e to the power f of x. Okay, for all x in the set of real numbers, then and you can see that we have 3 points, 1 upon e, 1 and d, and the options are involving these values of the function at these 3 points in an order. Okay, so we need to determine the correct order. Now I actually tried to come up with the definition of the function f, but I did not succeed. Okay, so I thought of considering the function e to the power x. Okay, but that is not the correct choice, and definitely it is not an odd function. Okay, so I had to reject, unfortunately I had to reject this and go with the standard method. Okay, yes. Now there are 2 parts in which I have divided the solution. First thing is to find the values of f of 0, well sorry, not f of 0, f of 1, then f of e and f of 1 upon e. Okay, that is the first part, and in the second part let's make use of the fact that it is an odd function. Okay, yes, so first you have to write down the data. See, there is no need to write the data in the actual examination. Okay, just if you just use it correctly, then it's fine. Okay, so what I first did is I substituted x at 0. We are allowed free to take any value, any real value, because it's defined for all real values of x. all real values x. Okay, so if you let x to be 0 and substitute it here in the functional equation that we have, then e to the power 0 will be 1. Yes, so f of 1 will be equal to e to the power f of 0. Okay, yes, then I let x to be 1. So if x is 1, then f of e became e to the power f of 1. Again, the same thing. If x is 1, LHS will be f of e, RHS will be e to the power f of 1. Okay, last, I went for x equal to -1 because I knew that f of e to the power -1 or f of 1 upon e is what we want. Okay, so again substitute x equal to -1 here. LHS will be f of 1 upon e, RHS will be f of -1. Okay, see now if you observe here, we have everything that is there in the options. F of 1 is there, f of e is there, and f of 1 upon e is there. And more importantly, we have got 0, 1 and -1 on the right hand side, and we can now make use of the fact that it is an odd function. Okay, so if f is odd, f of minus x is minus f of x for all values of x in its domain. Yes. Now see what happens if I substitute x equal to 0. Okay, if f is 0, then f of -0 will also be f of 0, but that is minus f of 0. Okay, see that implies that f of 0 must be equal to 0. Okay, and this is an important result. For any odd function defined for all real numbers, or at least defined for 0, okay, so if 0 is part of the domain of the function, then f of 0 must be equal to 0, right? Yes. So once we get it that f of 0 is 0, then we can get the value of f of 1. Substitute f of 0 as 0, so f of 1 is 1. Yes. And then accordingly we will get the value of f of e as well, which is e to the power f of 1, but f of 1 is 1, so f of e will be e. Okay, and then finally we can make use of the fact that it is odd, so f of -1 is going to be minus f of 1, so it will be -1. Okay, so f of 1 upon e will be e to the power f of -1 or e to the power -1 or 1 upon e itself. Okay, yes, see now what we have is f of 1, just a second, yeah, f of 1, then f of e, and then f of 1 upon e, correct? And now if we know the value of e, the approximate value of e, it is between 2 and 3, so e must be greater than 1, and because it is positive obviously, then 1 upon e will be less than 1. Okay, but what are 1 upon e, 1 and e? These are nothing but f of 1, f of 1 upon e, f of 1 and f of e respectively. Yes, so f of 1 upon e is less than f of 1 is less than f of e, that is option A. See now, even if you get the result correctly, if the options are similar, then there are chances that you may end up getting you may end up marking the incorrect option, so please don't do that. Please read the options carefully. Okay, now here it is, there is no problem, 1 upon e, 1 e, so they are in the ascending order. Yes, so it is option A. Okay, yes, all of the other options are incorrect. Yes, C is not right because of this. B is also not right, and so is D. Okay, so 4.8, option A. Question number 4.9. The value of the integral of x squared plus 2 upon x cubed into cos x with respect to x as x goes from pi to 2 pi is minus 5 upon 4 pi squared, minus 1 upon 4 pi squared, 1 upon 4 pi squared, and 5 upon 4 pi squared. Okay, now I want to tell you two things about this problem before I tell you the actual solution. Okay, in some of the MCQs, when you see the solution, what happens is you miss those things which did not work out. Okay, for example, in this particular multiple choice question, I tried two different approaches. Approach one was by parts and approach two was by the Leibniz rule, and in the language of integration we call it differentiation under the integral sign. Okay, but none of these approaches actually worked. Okay, now if I directly tell you the solution, I think I'm not doing the right justice to this problem, because it requires you to not only use the technique of integration by parts, but also to observe carefully the rational function that is there, that is x squared plus 2 upon x cube. Okay, so it's only by trying out different approaches and finding out that they are not working, you will end up with the correct approach to the problem. Okay, so before we go to the solution of this problem, let me tell you the approaches that did not work. Okay, now the approach one partially worked. Okay, because it allowed me to disqualify options C and D, because it led me to the conclusion that the integral's value will be negative. Okay, so let us see what this approach one is saying. Well, so first I took x squared plus 2 upon x cube as the first function and cos x as the second function, the usual thing that we do in the integration by parts. Okay, ILATE. So algebraic functions always have the first priority and then the trigonometric functions to be the first functions in the integration by parts. Okay, so I tried that. First function as it is, integral of the second, cos s integral is sine, minus integral of the derivative of the first function. Okay, see, now what I've done is I've split this function. We have x squared plus 2 upon x cube, so x squared by x cube is 1 upon x, and this is 2 upon x cube. So derivative of 1 upon x is negative 1 upon x squared, and derivative of 2 upon x cube is minus 6 upon x to the power 4 into integral of the second function. Okay, now if you see the first part here, no matter what the rational function, or no matter what the value the rational function takes at 2 pi and pi, because sine 2 pi and sine pi both are 0, this will eventually be equal to 0. Yes. Okay, and then comes the second function, or second integral I should say. Now here you have got the terms inside the bracket to be negative, and this negative sign comes up because of the formula of the integration by parts. So if you take these two negative signs outside, it will become positive. Yes, and the integrand is now 1 upon x squared plus 6 upon x to the power 4 into sine x. And now you can see that this is an even function, 1 upon x squared plus 6 upon x to the power 4. So no matter what values you have, this function will always be positive. Okay, this one. And what about sine x? If x is taking values between pi and 2 pi, we know that sine is positive only in the first and the second quadrants. So if you let x to be anywhere in the third and in the fourth quadrants, then sine x will be negative. So if this entire function is negative for x in the range pi to 2 pi, obviously the integral, which is ultimately limit of a sum, will be negative. Yes. So now this allows us to eliminate options C and D, as I pointed out earlier. So it then leaves us in a situation wherein we will be required to evaluate this integral. Okay, 1 upon x squared plus 6 upon x to the power 4 into sine x. Although we know the sign of the integral, we still don't know how to evaluate it. Okay, and because we have two negative options, this method is inconclusive. Okay, see, that means we are eventually in a similar situation, algebraic function into trigonometric function. Okay, so then I thought of switching or changing my approach, and then I went to the approach 2. Okay, in which I applied the Leibniz rule, and now the question was where to introduce the parameter. Should we introduce it instead of 2 as a, or should we introduce it inside the trigonometric function. Okay, now I even tried introducing the parameter here, that is taking x squared plus 2, but well, that didn't work out. Even this has not worked. It has given me a differential equation involving an integral. Okay, so what I did is I changed cos x to cos of ax. Okay, and then I differentiated this integral. See, now you might be knowing this already. If this integral's variable of integration is x, after substitution of the limits, x won't be there. Okay, so what will be there is a, the parameter. Okay, so the integral then becomes the function of a. Yes, so according to the Leibniz rule, the derivative of this will be the partial derivative of the function inside. Okay, with respect to the parameter. Now x squared plus 2 upon x cube is a constant as far as the parameter is concerned. Derivative of cos is minus sign, but this time you will not multiply it by a, you will multiply it by x, because you are taking the partial derivative with respect to not x but a. Okay, so you have to assume that x is a constant. Okay, see, now that led to the cancellation of x, well, 1 power of x, and then that gave me x squared. So we then had x squared plus 2 upon x cube into minus sine ax as the integrand. Okay, or 1 plus 2 upon x squared into negative of sine of ax. Okay, now if at all we could integrate this, then we would have again integrated it with respect to a to get the I, and we could have got the value of the constant of integration by selecting a to be 0, but that has not happened. Okay, so the third approach which finally worked is a combination of by parts and careful rearrangement of this algebraic function. Okay, so let's see now what that approach is. Yeah, okay, now if you observe the NEST question papers, then you will find that the multiple choice questions, or the questions which have only one option correct, they are not very much difficult, okay, in my opinion, compared to the multiple select questions. So what I thought was, why not try integrating by parts and splitting this function as we did previously. Okay, now the main thing is this: x squared upon x cube is 1 upon x. Let me use orange color now. Okay, and 2 upon x cube is a rational function which is scalar multiple of 1 upon x cube. And now if you observe, the derivative of 1 upon x is 1 upon x, negative 1 upon x squared. So we are now worried about just the power of x. Okay, so when you differentiate, the power reduces by 1, and when you integrate, the power increases by 1. Okay, so derivative of 1 upon x is 1 upon x squared, and the integral of 1 upon x cube is something which has x raised to minus 2 or 1 upon x squared in it. Okay, see, now this allowed me, or this actually gave me some hint that we should still use the integration by parts, but for the first time we should take 1 upon x as the first function, and then we should take the same function as the second function. Okay, so here we are kind of violating this rule. Okay, by not taking the algebraic function first but taking the trigonometric function first. Okay, so let me explain you how that works. Okay, first you have to split this numerator. Okay, so it will be 1 upon x plus 2 upon x cube. Keep the trigonometric function as it is, and then you have to split your integral into two integrals. Okay, 1 upon x into cos x as the first integrand, and 2 upon x cube into cos x as the second integrand. Okay, now as far as the first integral is concerned, that is integral of f1, I have applied the integration by parts by following the ILAT. Okay, so it means integrate the first function. Keep the first function as it is into integral of the second, so integral of cos is sine. Okay, minus integral of derivative of the first into integral of the second. Okay, Now the key point is to keep this integral as it is. If you see our previous approaches, even there we have an integral of the similar kind, trigonometric function into 1 upon x squared or 1 upon x raised to 4. Okay, but the benefit of this is now we have something else with us. Okay, and that is the second integral, which was not there in our first approach. Okay, so let's now apply ILAT for f2, but this time let me not say ILAT, let me say ILTAE. Okay, yes, so this time I have taken cos x as the first function, that is I have given priority to the trigonometric function over the algebraic function. Okay, so cos x as it is, or the first function, into integral of the second. Okay, now keep 2 as it is, integral of 1 upon x cubed will be x raised to minus 2 upon 2, right? Because it is x raised to minus 3, so minus 3 plus 1 will be minus 2, x raised to n plus 1 upon n plus 1. Okay, and this is the point where these arguments are into play. Okay, for 1 upon x squared, that's fine. Okay, derivative of the first. But from 1 upon x cubed to 1 upon x raised to 2, because it is integral, you have to take cos x as your first function. Okay, so I have already explained you the first part. Let me do it again. First function as it is into integral of the second minus integral of the derivative of the first. Now cos's derivative is minus sign, into again the integral of the second function. So 2 into x to the power minus 2 upon minus 2. Okay, and now by selecting trigonometric function first and the algebraic function to be the second one, these integrals that make their appearance, you will find that they are equal and opposite. Okay, for example, consider the first integral, pi to 2 pi, negative into negative positive, so sine x upon x squared dx, the first one. Okay, and if you observe this integral here, okay, it has 3 negative signs, negative, negative, negative. So negative into negative into negative will be negative. Yes, 2 will go, right? So pi to 2 pi, sine x in the numerator, and x raised to minus 2 in the numerator means x raised to 2 in the denominator. Okay, so these integrals, which are for us impossible to integrate at this stage, they will now get cancelled. Okay, and this is, I would say, the eureka moment of the problem. If you cancel them, then what you have is just substitution of the limits in the functions. Okay, now let's not worry about this, because sine pi and sine 2 pi both are 0, so even this will be 0. Okay, that you can see here. So then it boils down to the expression cos x into minus 1 upon x squared with limits pi and 2 pi, because again 2 will get cancelled. So substitute the upper limit, cos 2 pi 1, 2 pi raised to minus 2 upon minus 1, minus cos pi, the lower limit pi, cos pi minus 1 into pi raised to minus 2 upon minus 1. Now the moment you get this, now it's a very straightforward thing. Okay, minus 1 upon 4 pi squared will be the first term. Keep this negative sign as it is. Negative, negative, positive, 1 upon pi squared. Take minus 1 upon pi squared common. 1 upon 4 plus 1 will be 5 upon 4. So it will be minus 5 upon 4 pi squared. That is option A, right? Yes. Now it's quite unusual that you don't give the algebraic function the place that it deserves. Okay, so in this problem, particularly in the second integral or integrand, we have reversed the priorities of trigonometric and algebraic functions for the sake of the problem. Okay, and it is important to note that this particular splitting of the functions is not very sudden. Okay, because usually what happens is, in mathematics, if you try with an approach which you think might work, okay, but if it does not work, then you cannot say that, okay, this is not working, what should I do? Okay, you should keep on trying different approaches. So if approach 1 does not take you to the answer, well, see, now it has actually taken you one step ahead or one step closer to your answer because it has eliminated option C and D. Okay, option or approach 2 did not work out completely because it again gave you an integral which was impossible at this stage. Okay, you can numerically integrate it, of course, but you see that there is this appearance of functions which differ in their degree by 2. 0 degree, degree -2. Okay, second, well, -2, -4. Okay, so this will then connect you somewhere in your brain that okay, differentiation actually decreases the degree by 1 and integration actually increases the degree by 1. Okay, and then that actually will provide you some hints as to how to deal with this particular problem, and it has worked, and our answer has been -5/4 pi squared. That is option A. Let's now go to the last question, that is 4.10, or should I say 4.10 due to decimal point. Okay, a cylindrical tank of height 3 units and diameter 2 units resting on its base is partially filled up with water up to a height of h units. Okay, thereafter it is turned horizontal and placed on a level ground with its lateral surface in contact with the ground. In this position, the maximum depth of the water is 1/2 units. Then h is equal to 1 minus 3√3/4 pi, 1 minus 3/4 pi, 1 minus 3√3/2 pi, and 1 minus 3/2 pi. These are the 4 options. Okay, so it is very much essential to draw the figure in this particular problem. Second thing is that this requires you to know the formula for volume of a cylinder, which I think all of you know. But more importantly, it also requires you to know the area of the sector formula, which you perhaps study in the chapter on angle and its measurement, the very first chapter of 11th standard usually. Okay, so if you know that area of sector is 1/2 r squared theta, where r is the radius of the circular sector and theta is the central angle in radians, I think you can easily solve the problem. And of course, that water is incompressible. Okay, so that the volume is constant. Okay, so here is how I have solved the problem. In the part 1, I have considered the first situation, that is cylinder resting on the base. Stable equilibrium. Yes, and this blue circular layer that you can see, this is the top surface of the water. Okay, so what's the volume of the water currently? Radius is 1 because the diameter is 2. Yes, units. Yes, so volume of the water is going to be pi into r squared into h cubic units. Okay, yes. Now in the second condition, the cylinder is resting with its lateral surface in contact with the ground. Yes, so you may get an oscillatory motion if you make a perturbation here. Okay, yes, and here they are saying that the maximum depth of the water is 1/2, so it must be through the center. Okay, perpendicular to the ground, as you can see here. Okay, so here the upper layer or uppermost layer of the water will be a rectangle. Okay, yes. Now because I said the water is incompressible, so the volume of the water here will be same as the volume of the water here. So that is the main part. Okay, now in the figure 3, what I have done is I have drawn the cross section of the cylinder lying on the ground with its lateral surface in contact. Okay, so I have just cut a section here and I have redrawn it there. Okay, a vertical section, and I have called the center of this circle as C, and the end points of its radii as A and B, where the water actually meets the circle. Okay, so A and B, and I've dropped a perpendicular from C on the chord AB, and I've called the foot as D. Okay, now because the radius of the cylinder is 1, the lengths of CA and CB will be 1. Okay, and now comes the main part. Because they are saying that the maximum depth of the water is 1 by 2 units. Okay, if I extend this line CD so that it again meets our circle. Okay, let me now call that point as E, then CE will be equal to 1. Yes, let me show point D again here. Yes, this is D and this is E. Okay, the green dot is E, and CE is now equal to 1, but DE, okay, this is DE, the depth. Okay, because this is all water in the blue color. Okay, so because the maximum depth is 1 upon 2 units, length of DE will be 1 upon 2, but what is CE? CE is nothing but the radius of the cylinder. Okay, so from that, can we calculate the length of CD? Yes, length of CD will be CA or CE minus DE. So length of CD is 1 upon 2. Yes, now once we get the length of CD as 1 upon 2, which is half of the radius, now we can conclude that triangle ACD is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. Okay, because at D you have a right angle, and this is 1 and this is 1 upon 2. So side opposite to 30 degrees is half of the hypotenuse. Yes, so ACD, the central angle, is 60, but that is not the angle that we want. We want twice of that angle, that is ACB. And because these two triangles are congruent, angle ACB will be 120 or 2 pi by 3 radians. And this is where I will now use the area of the sector formula. Okay, area of the sector ACB will be half r squared theta. Yes, so 1 by 2 radius 1 into 2 pi by 3. And see, now we are interested in finding the area of this cross-sectional area of the water. So we need to subtract the area of the triangle from the area of the sector. Okay, so what is the area of the triangle CAB? Half base into height. Okay, now AD is the half of the base, and that will be root 3 by 2. So the total base, that is AB, will be root 3. Okay, and height is 1 upon 2. Yes, so 1 upon 2 into root 3 into 1 upon 2 will be the area of the triangle CAB. 1 upon 2 into 1 upon 2, 4, root 3 as it is. Okay, so area of the sector ACB is, I think, pi by 3 square units, and area of the triangle ACB or CAB is root 3 by 4 square units. Okay, now see, this can actually prove that 2 pi by 3 is greater than root 3 by 4. Quite an interesting inequality, which is otherwise might be difficult to prove. But see, now why can I say that 2 pi by 3 is greater than root 3 by 4? Because 2 pi by 3 is representing area of the sector ACB, and root 3 by 4 is representing area of the triangle ACB. Okay, we know that area of the sector is always greater than the area of the corresponding triangle. So that is also another way, or I should say the geometrical way of proving the inequalities. 2 pi by 3 is greater than root 3 by 4. Okay, so please take a note of that. Let's resume the solution. Now what is the cross-sectional area of the water? Clearly the subtraction of root 3 by 4 from 2 pi by 3. Yes. And now we will use the fact that the volume is conserved, or the amount of water. Okay. Now the main reason for determining this cross-sectional area was, if we now multiply it, okay, if we now multiply it by the height of the cylinder, then we will get the volume, and height of the cylinder is 3. Yes, So pi into 1 squared into h, which was the volume of the water when it was in the position 1, is now equal to what? Cross sectional area of the water in the second position, that is pi by 3 minus root 3 by 4 into the height of the water. Well, not height of the water, sorry, height of the cylinder. Let's not call it h, or at least lowercase h, let me call it uppercase h. Okay, which is 3. This one. Yes, and now this is a very simple problem. All you have to do is shift pi to the other side, you will get h. Okay, first cross multiply, so 4 pi minus 3 root 3 into 3 upon 12, okay, equal to pi into h, so h will be that thing divided by pi. Okay, now 3 will go, this will be 4, and then you can split the numerator. Okay, 4 pi upon 4 pi 1 minus 3 root 3 upon 4 pi, option A. Yes. Okay, now I don't think this problem is very difficult, but you should use the facts that you already know cleverly. Okay, or I should say you should use the correct facts. And we are not very much familiar in finding the volume by the slicing method, okay, which is one of the standard exercises in applications of definite integrals, and that is to split the volume into smaller sections and just adding them. But here, because the cross-sectional area was a constant, by just multiplying it by the height of the cylinder, we got the answer. Okay, yes. Now this problem can be made complicated by not considering the cylinder but by considering a cone, or a right circular cone. So if you are interested, you can give it a try. Okay, homework. Or you may be asked this question during your interviews, I don't know. Okay, but be ready for that. Yes, so now we have completed all the questions from 2017 mathematics MCQs. Okay, in the next video we will cover the 2018 question paper MCQs. Again, I thank you all for your support and encouragement through your comments and subscriptions. If you have not yet subscribed to our channel, then please do that and hit the bell icon so that you will not miss any updates. Thank you.